Welcome back to Empower You. Today we're talking with Dianne Collins, author of the book, Do You Quantum Think? Dianne, take us into the next piece of this conversation that we're having about quantum think and how it's affecting the consciousness in the world.
Well, I actually wanted to, Bryn, do you want to just restate that question again? Because that was such a great question about...
Yeah, so what I was basically asking you or reflecting upon is this a new way of, well, the idea that we're talking about how to develop new paradigms for ourselves rather than having somebody deliver the answer, here's the paradigm, here's where you're going. And I started to refer to this and ask you if your book was about teaching us a process, and you said no. The how-to has been, and
Right.
how to do it isn't the answer either.
Right. It's really knowing the dynamic. So there's two things that we're really talking about simultaneously. One is, what are the dynamics of creation that we have been divinely bestowed with by human birth that enable us to create anything? I say, well, did we create the moon? Well, maybe in one very esoteric, far out interpretation, everything is a holographic projection that we're, right? But not on, let's say, on a very practical level of what you're talking about. We have been granted the ability to make decisions and choices and create in daily human life. So there's one thing is knowing the dynamics of creation and the principles. And the other thing is what are the actual new structures going to be? So when we talk about a new paradigm in the outer world that we share, in the practical everyday, we need our societal institutions. How do we recreate those? So that is what is, I would say it like this, because they're absolutely related. The way that we have been conditioned to think has created the institutions that we've been living in. Now that we're on the precipice, we're more than the precipice, as you say, we're already in this emerging, evolving new worldview. And our thinking has surpassed the level of institutions that we're living in. And so what we're seeing in the world is we're seeing the limits of the effectiveness of all of these institutions. And this is, as a very keen astrologer, one of my favorite astrologers, that it's being shown. The energy is showing us what's not working so we can do something about it, so we can fix it, right? And so I would say the institutions we have are limited by the thinking that created them. Going back to the Einstein, I call the modern day mantra, the problems we have cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created them. Now, another one of my favorite quotes is from Buckminster Fuller, the famous design scientist. And he says, don't try to change the existing system, create a new model that displaces that one.
Yeah.
Now, this is really what quantum thinking does. So you're not really, it's not like, it's again, not an either or. You're not trading in one way of thinking for another. We have in our repertoire what the old worldview thinking has taught us. I said it before, how to be analytical, how to look at things in an organized, observe the data, categorize the data, make conclusions from the data. And the problem is we got stuck with the conclusions we made because everything within us and around us evolved, we can't be stuck with the same old conclusions as if they're a fixed reality. That was the old worldview. Objects are solid and fixed to our perceptual apparatus. But we know that the deeper reality is there's nothing solid and fixed at all. In fact, the cutting edge scientists say there's no matter. That was the father of quantum mechanics, Max Planck. There is no matter as such. There's only mind. It's a mind base. It's an intelligent energy that's conscious. That's the clay that we're using. So when you say, well, how do we know? Is it a process? Is it, what's the new structure? The first thing is to restructure our thinking. That's quantum thinking. It gives, in a very simple way, fun, right, Janet? Say yes. I try to have fun with this. That you get the framework. You expand yourself so that when you look at how am I creating my experience right now? And I say it like this. Well, let me just say, I want to make the shift for everyone right now. But first, let me say, when you look at what's creating my experience, because what I experience, what I hold in the feeling tone of my being, we could call my personal resonance, a resonant field. What manifests is what resonates. But what's creating the resonance is how our patterns of thinking, that is thought, that is in the form, well, I say it like this, intent in the form of thought, experienced in the feeling tone of your being, is what gives rise to your reality, what manifests. So when we learn to create a new resonance within us because we understand how to use these faculties of mind, the central role of intent. Now I want to make this out of the abstract if I can. Do I have time to do that, Jen?
Oh, yes. Yes,
okay.
You do.
So let's say the very big, the heart of the paradigm shift in science, which also validates, not that it needs validating, but it merges, it converges with spiritual wisdom, is that there are distinctions in life, in the physical, obviously, but no actual separation. Now, if you're living only in the physical, we look separate from one another. We look separate. It looks like there's some out there environment that's separate from us. The science, you can imagine, you're a scientist, you're sitting around on the earth going, what's it all about, Alfie? And you're right, you're looking, well, what is it? Let me just say, what is this pen made of? And if we can break it down to its constituent parts and figure out how it works, in a cause and effect, push on this, pull on that to have something happen. But the new worldview, the quantum worldview, is that there are no actual separations, and because we exist in fields. Now, the fields that we could say energy intelligent conscious fields are invisible to the senses, right?
Right.
Well, some people can see auras, but I'm not talking about that level of just an ordinary life. We're connected through fields. We know it because you walk into a room of happy, exuberant people, they haven't said a word to you, but you feel the energy of the room. Or you walk into a boardroom where there was just a lot of uptight, tense fighting going on, and you can feel the energy of it. So how did we get that? Because we are in a continuous exchange of energy intelligence. So the new world, the quantum world view, they call this the observer effect. In quantum think, it's the second principle, the second distinction, I call it. We're living in an observer-created reality. Now, this is how it comes down to how do we change our experience and therefore, our world, is that the scientists discovered that the instrument through which they were looking to observe a particle of energy was having an effect on what was being observed. They call that the observer effect. So there could never get absolute certainty about, they said, the location and the velocity, the speed of the energy, because which makes logical sense, analytical logic. If something is moving, you know, where is it? Maybe there's better tracking devices now. But the idea of it, because quantum thinking is about how we can use the discoveries of science to shape the way we think. It's not so much about the science, even though the science is interesting. But it's that, well, what is the instrument of observation for us as people? What we hold in awareness, what we hold in consciousness. So we could say, if you're going into a meeting, I always use this because it's easy to see as an example. If you're going to get a new client and you're going in with a set of assumptions, a set of conclusions that you've reached about that client. Remember, the old worldview has conditioned us to see reality as fixed and static. The new worldview is there's nothing fixed and static. That's the good news. Everything is malleable. We can shift and transform in an instant, especially in the relational realm, because the relational realm is non-material. So that's where, you know, the more dense the reality gets, the obviously slower moving, denser energy, what we call the physical, is going to be a little trickier to move that with our mind. But in the relational realm where things begin, or in the visionary realm where what do we want to invent in our new structures? That everything begins in thought. When we can get some command over our mind, or I like to think of it as make your mind your friend, then we start to see other things. But I know I'm talking long right now, but I want to make one other important point about this. So the instrument of observation, you're going into a client meeting and you've made these conclusions. This client is difficult to deal with. I don't know whether they're going to want to sign my new contract. And, you know, all these things. I'm not feeling very confident today. I wish I got more sleep last night, you know, and you're going in, and all this is coloring. Coloring isn't the right word, mixed metaphors, but it's shaping your resonance. And so when you're quantum thinking, I call these thoughts least action pathways. The way the energy goes, because it's been that route before, the least creative action, the least conscious action. They're just thoughts. And they're not real in the sense of being fixed and absolute. They're just a thought. And just because you have a thought doesn't make it the truth. You don't have to believe it. Half of the thoughts we have, I think more than half, don't even belong to us because we exist in fields. We're in a mind field and we're picking up intel that's not even ours. So to be able to make that distinction between a thought that's visit, a least action pathway thought, and a thought that you're initiating, your consciously generated intent. So you're going into this meeting, this happens instantaneously. You catch yourself in those thoughts, you realize, wow, that resonance isn't going to get me the result I want. You interrupt them just like that with consciousness, and you think, what do I do then? What is my intent for my meeting with Anne? And this is how you create from intent. That is the active dynamic of creation for human beings that we've been divinely bestowed with by virtue of human birth, is the power to direct our attention and therefore energy in the form of intent using language. And so we would advise our clients, what would you want the experience to be of your meeting? Well, that we're both excited, we really see the value in what each other is bringing. And so that's the statement of intent. Anne and I are excited to be together. We're really looking forward to working together. We get new surprises in this meeting that we've never seen before. You can make up anything you want. And the point is, that's not positive thinking. The difference between positive thinking and quantum thinking is this very, 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 very important point. Positive thinking, it's always good to have positive thoughts, but positive thinking in this sense is putting a positive spin or an affirmation on top of a negative conclusion that you're holding as but that's the way it is. I've got 5 years of evidence on this client. No. Quantum thinking based in a quantum fundamental principle that reality is not fixed and solid. Reality is context dependent. Reality is context, the context is dependent on what you bring to your observation. That's the observer effect. We, as human observers, not just visual, it doesn't mean, it means what observation in this case means what we hold in our awareness. That is what is meant by the observer effect. Observer created reality. If we're bringing a set of conclusions that do not serve ourselves or the other people or the situation, we have the power to interrupt it immediately, to not give it any meaning that we have that thought. It's not analytical. My mother told me I'd never make it when I was 3 years old. No, it's that, but really, that's the that's where we get stuck. I know why I'm this way. I am a terrible person. I have bad thoughts. I call it wretched self syndrome. It's got to go. I can, I'm not, I'm that. And any variation on I'm not good enough theme. We're not stuck with any way that we've ever related to ourselves in the past. And nor should we be in this time. So I wanted to just go into some depth on that, because the observer created reality. When you create an intent, the active dynamic, the passive dynamic is allowing. And this is what I wanted to say. You will, because this gets back to you, Bren, and how do we create these new structures? When you create an intent for a new structure, a way of seeing something to be revealed, what you're doing is, with your intent, is tapping in to source field, to infinite intelligence. And you're connecting into the frequency range that is consistent with your intent. So when you're quantum thinking, intent is not one end result. It's an activation of the field, the energy intelligent field, that will bring about many results that you cannot see right now.
Now, in my experience, though, and Dianne, what you're saying is just so profound. But I also know that there is a difference also between what you're describing and where I hear many people go with this. Oh, you create your reality. I mean, we have had that language forever. And in fact, generalistically, though, I've heard people really use that as a way to justify a type of positive thinking. And yet, so somehow inside of what you're describing, the key to me is that elimination of the wretched self syndrome, including the necessity inside of myself to eliminate the wretched other syndrome as well, right? I mean, there is an acceptance, I can neither pretend that everybody else is somehow horribly flawed, that I am. So there is inside of participating with intent, I'm also having to have a relationship with what I am. I think of it kind of in terms of chemistry, right? If I'm a chemical compound and you're a chemical compound, I can come in with a certain intent, but we're not going to create together something that's not inherent to either one of us. If we do, it won't be sustainable. So we are working with the nature.
I don't know about that. What do you mean by that? Not inherent to one of us.
I find that
inherent. What?
I'll go back to myself as an astrologer. I'll use that paradigm for that framework. I can work with a client, and most of the time I'm working with a client to bring them into a framework that better suits the energy they're actually operating inside of, right?
Right. I totally get that.
I'm a woman and I'm not a man. I will tell you for myself, there are inherent energies that I'm working with, and a man is different, and I won't go in, you know, I wouldn't pretend as a woman to assume I was certain things that I'm not. And,
Right.
and I don't mean that in a limitation of myself as a woman. I understand.
No, just matter of fact.
That is. And that means that I have, as a soul, made some choices. I have accepted certain structures around my existence. And some of those are inherent. Some I have some play with, some I have less play with, but this is by design. I've accepted skin. I am not an etheric being with absolutely no energetic boundaries. Having said that, there may be a truth that I need to resonate with, and a truth that my client need to resonate with, and maybe no matter what, I may set intent in this meeting. I may wish to have an experience, but inside of that, I also have to be doing the traditional prayer. You know, the best, that's the highest good for all of us, sort of thing. I mean, I want to participate with the realm that I can't perceive, and be true to myself. And as long as I've eliminated the wretched self syndrome, or I'm willing to suspend that for me and for everybody else, true chemistry can come about, is what I'm feeling, right? The really powerful chemistry. Or I could say, I get with this person and something nice happens. And I'm interacting with this energy over here, and something really cool happens. I really prefer that. So that's a difference between what I've heard you describe and just the idea of you create your reality. Yes, it's true.
Oh, yeah. You know what?
A blank slate creation.
No, it's not, because there's different, to use the scientist term, orders. There are different orders of reality. And this is very important, what Bryn is bringing up. I'm saying that because I'm saying it to everyone else and Janet. But what you're bringing up, because in the physical realm, you know, the standard, you're not going to jump in front of a bus. Mm-hmm. That's why I brought up in the relational realm, you have to know how this energy intelligence works. What you're bringing up, which I find a very, very interesting conversation too, and I've thought about it. Let's say in the astrological realm, right? Or I call it the esoteric. In quantum think, I distinguish 7 dimensions. It's an infinite possibility universe. That's distinction number 3. So you could distinguish any number of worldviews, or, you know, it's infinite. But I distinguish 7 just for the sake of. So the physical, the energetic, meaning mostly subtle energy, the virtual realm of mind and consciousness, the spiritual realm of heart, where we know we experience our interconnection, the cosmic realm of operating principles that scientists and metaphysicians discover, right? And like spiritual laws, and the esoteric and divine. But the esoteric is what I consider the realm of the dimension of evolution of these various soul sciences, of the SOUL. So when you take astrology, for example, which you brought up, and you look at that and you say, okay, the moment of birth, right? The natal chart, and you're looking at, that's like a blueprint. Would you both agree with that?
Yeah.
You're the expert. So
a map, a blueprint. That's
right. And you're looking at, and I know human design is another kind of blueprint. So you're looking at a blueprint, and you're then you have these tendencies. So I think that's what you mean, Bryn. It's like you're within, you know, if you're born a man or a woman, you're within those tendencies,
right?
Or certain, you know, physical predilections that in this case, and I love the way one of my astrology teachers once said it. She says, you're born with a talent to wield with a knife. You could become, you know, the sculptor, the butcher, the murderer, or the surgeon. So that's where I love that you're born with that talent, as you know, I'm sure. Some people never even explore the use of the talent. But then how you're going to use that talent, that's where the free will conscious choice comes in. And I think that's the state that we're in right now, collectively, where to really get to know ourselves in these deeper ways, to connect to those talents, those gifts, that genius, those tendencies, like not taking them as that's the way it is, but taking it more like a possibility within a certain range. So if it's a world of infinite if we could be any possible human trait, but it's getting narrowed down by the imprint that we could call that our, whatever choices our soul made for this time, to be in this time frame, in this era for humanity, and how do we play that out individually right now? And I think that's one of the most important questions for any of us to be in, because that relates to the societal structures, is that if you realize what you're here for, and of course how it gets expressed over your entire lifetime changes. But let's say right now, where people are feeling the stress, where people are seeing, things dissolving and falling apart with, around them, all these accidents and this and that, and prejudices and bigotry and all that stuff. And you say, well, what's important to me now? Who am I in this matter? And going beyond that, what you were talking about earlier, going beyond the automatic, well, here's what my family always did. Here's what I was told to do. Now, I'm not saying generations of people, many people do want to do what their family did prior to that, but by choice, not by least action pathway.
We have a term that's it's actually very, very old school, but it becomes more and more relevant, I think, which is, to me, when I say sustainable, I'm talking about choices, frameworks, decisions, a move forward for us that is naturally funded by our own individual sources of power and energy. If I have an unsustainable program, company, system, etc., it means that I must either repress energy or drain energy from outside of myself to sustain it. That is unsustainable, right? This push me, pull you of having to drag at power. And the term that's not new that comes up a lot is, how do I go forward comfortable in my own skin? Comfortable in my own skin is a piece that I find with coming to terms with who I am, not engaging it from a shame-based belief system, not needing to prop it up inside of a purely egotistical view, neither repressing talents and qualities that I have, nor trying to assume qualities that I don't have. So that whole concept to me is what I bring together with astrology. It may not even matter what framework or how you move into that place, but our current paradigms, our current old struck paradigms, probably leave most people uncomfortable in their own skin, right? The classic is you're surviving, but somehow some form of external drug is keeping us going, right? We're relying on too much on the coffee or the whatever, and I'm not against those things. I'm just saying, that we're not able to just simply fund our own experience in a joyful way with the power naturally channeling through our own bodies. So that's an unsustainable path.
I can't agree with you. I don't agree with anything you just said. Please forgive me, but because I love your thinking. But The reason that I'm saying that really and pushing back on it, Bryn, is because the more we say what you just said, the more we keep it in place. And so to be it's not like what you're saying isn't valid.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is the more we go into agreement with that, the less we're creating what we really want. So in the quantum think principles, which I call distinctions in thinking, there's a distinction, transformation as distinct from change.
That was going to be my very next question.
It was? Tell me.
I mean, I have your little cheat sheet here of the 21 distinctions, and transformation as distinct from change. I wanted to hear more about what that meant in terms of this conversation that we're having. And, you know, we talk about transformation, we talk about change. What does it mean to quantum think that way?
Okay, first of all, I have to say, I love you. I love Bryn. This is my least action pathway, right? I don't want to make anyone feel bad. That's something, which I don't anyway, by choice. But the transformation as distinct from change, in order to change something, you have to keep the thing in place that you want to change. And that's why, like, that the idea that if you want to create from new, you don't have to deal with the current pattern at all, because you just create from, well, what do I want now? And so what you're talking about, Bryn, the part that I didn't really, I don't see it that way, because I don't see it as fixed, is that because you said something about, well, you can't be what's not in you to be. That's
yeah. So I mean, as you're saying that, I'm taking back in what you're reflecting on, and I'm thinking to myself, it probably depends on whether you're the watcher or the person who hasn't developed the watcher, right? If the I is
right.
the watcher, then everything is bringing to bear to come into alignment, right? Becoming quote unquote comfortable in your skin, may be more engaged with the new process and less about staying in the herd mentality. Because it's true, the herd mentality of what it was, you know, would be destructive, and yet also the comfort zone. Right?
Yeah, well, you see,
yes, we're going to keep staying inside the known and never go out into the unknown because we're more comfortable inside of the known, and then it would be the opposite. So,
I don't know if we're more comfortable inside of the known either. But all these things that this is why I say blame it on the old worldview, because all these conclusions that we make about the way it is in this type of analysis. It's not that it's wrong or incorrect or bad in any way. I find it to be, but I don't think it's helpful for what we want. Because if we think that, you know, and I love what you said earlier about getting rid of wretched self syndrome, not only for yourself, but for others. Mm-hmm. It's like such a brilliant insight. And we used to do this, what I call advanced program, where we would say, we call it bringing light to another person's least action pathway. So you're bringing the light of your awareness. It's really the light of your compassion. So when we talk about what is it to live the universal wisdom of unconditional love, of compassion, of joy, that we begin with joy, of being in a state of kind-heartedness. These are the universal wisdom, right? That we say the net and tennis. And that goes without saying that we all aspire to. How do we become the walking, talking embodiments? And you made that really, you know, brilliant insight about it. Can't just want it for, I don't have it anymore, but we want to be able to see another person in the midst of theirs and be able to bring our light, because our light shifts them because we're in the field together. So it's not a manipulation like I'm going to make you be some other way. It doesn't work that way. That's the old cause and effect. It's that my state influences whoever I come into contact with, locally and also non-locally into the world. We know, right, that we're vibrating out. So going back to the condition of where people are, and I get the point that, I know we have the same intent in the conversation, and I get the point that you're making about that, there are people who are in, let's say, an awakened state where they're able to make the choices that are conducive and are going to bring about the experience for ourselves and others. And then there are people who are just kind of in the automaticity of life. So because the old world view was called classical mechanical world view. So I wrote in Do You Quantum Think in the beginning, maybe there's nothing wrong with us. Mm-hmm. Maybe, in many ways, not to insult, we became automatic and mechanical too. Maybe, being shaped by a mechanical worldview. Maybe it's just that we reached a stage of evolution, as you pointed out, that we are now beyond. And so I like to, instead of saying people are this way, they're not that way, they're this way, to just say whatever automaticity people have going on, including thinking of themselves or others or the world in some disparaging or detrimental way, we are not stuck with that thought. We're not stuck with that thought form. In fact, when we have it, we need to interrupt it if we really want to create something new, because we don't want to energize that. As you say, what do we want to sustain? So the distinction, my voice, transformation as distinct from change, transformation means going beyond the current form. So it's one way is by creating a new intent. Another way, another form of intent is by being in the right question. Question is a trajectory. So if you would say, okay, these are the soul tendencies that you've been born with. Mm-hmm. If you had no, I'm not asking you this, but I'm just talking about, right, you and Jen. If you had no reliance on the past, on the old worldview of Dianne, of Bryn, of Janet, what would you be creating right now?
Right.
And the interesting thing is, all those things that you say are our ingredients, right? The soul, the things, the tendency, the qualities that we've been born with, plus there's more, that is going to come through anyway, because that's really your essential, the essence of who you are. How it gets played out is another story. And, an analogy for this, as you might know, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a cell biologist, and he's teaching the world that your DNA is not fixed. Your genetics are not absolute factors determining your health or not.
Wow.
And because it's not, you're born with those genes, but it's the readout of the genes that is variable. And that is dependent, he says, on the environment. He calls it belief. I call it thought. But what's the environment is how you're thinking is creating how your genes are responding.
Yes.
So that's like a metaphor for it. It's the same thing. How is your soul blueprint responding? So the more we become in a conscious relationship with our faculties of mind, the natural faculties and the principles that have everything operating, then it happens. It's like cool because it happens naturally. It's like, and I just say, to go back to, well, people are automatically this or that. I go, blame it on the old worldview. Okay, we're through with that now. Mechanical, in a least action pathway, in a bigotry, in a whatever. Blame it on the old worldview. So it's not that we're not going to hold people accountable, responsible for what they do in society. That's another realm. But on a very profound level of the highest, I think, dimension of being human, which is our divine nature, it's that, I think, that compassion, staying there, staying in the question, okay, here's how it's been. Now, how do I want it to be? And to begin speaking it. That blog that I wrote, that people responded, I made that up. It wasn't like I saw in the I did have circumstances, okay, but I used it. I just used it. I thought, okay, I've been on all these radio shows. I've listened to 3 times as many shows, like 1,000 shows. I see all these people like us right now having these conscious conversations. People who are putting like the brilliance of both of you. That's why I said, please let me hang out with these ladies into the world. That what was I being shown? Because this is part of, an aspect of living your purpose is to see what is being shown to you. Mm-hmm. And there's a distinction in quantum think called the holo movement of purpose, which is about distinguishing your worldly purpose by seeing the patterns. Now that I got from studying astrology, is we have patterns. But let's say, I like to think of it this way. See your life as one whole story. And like a well-written novel or screenplay, there's nothing in it that doesn't belong, and there's nothing in it that's left out, except our life continues, not like the end of a screenplay. And so even the worst things that happen, we know this. The terrible things that happen to people, it's part of what divine creator, however you relate to that, is giving us these experiences like training so that we can deliver on our purpose. So when you start to look at the patterns and you see you're a projector, you're an inquiring mind, you have the ability to really see the big picture and go beyond what already exists, right? That's a quality of a projector, I guess, right? And
if they look at us, yes.
Right. You were always like that. Were you ever not like, when you were 5 years old, you were like that, I'm sure. Were you? Yeah. And so that's how, that's how we put it together. It's like the puzzle. And then you add in human design. We haven't heard from Janet on human design in this conversation, but it's again, it gives you another nuance, another piece of knowledge. How do you think of it, Janet, when you look at the patterning of a person's life and then being able to choose given that patterning?
I mean, I look at it just like you do. I mean, it's all potential. And on any one end or the other of the spectrum, I can express that trait or that life purpose that I've come here with. It's about decoding what's right for me energetically. I mean, the whole of human design is about the energetics of how we're interacting and the energy that I'm projecting as well as the energy that I'm absorbing and then amplifying. And so it makes perfect sense to me. All of your quantum think principles, as I'm looking through them, I can see how in a quantum world that human design is really a quantum thinking sort of process or a quantum system.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
I mean, it truly is. Now, you know, the thing about systems, anyway, I have to go back to Bryn for a second. So did you get why I said, Bryn, I can't agree with you on this? Because I want to hold in place the reality that we do want.
Yeah.
And we realize, look, we all do it. I do it. And fortunately, I live with my husband. We're in the, you know, so he'll reflect. Like if I go into one of my wretched self syndrome, you know, thinking, oh, you know, what if I didn't do well on that show? And, you know, he'll say to me, why do you want to lock into that reality? And it really is like that. And I go, yeah, thanks for reminding me. Now, what was my intent again? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the interesting thing is in the quantum world, they say things move backwards and forwards through time, right? In all direction. It's omnidirectional. So you can shift. You can shift the experience of an event that already happened.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right?
Well, I've experienced that. I bet you have as well, right? You go through and you find some really healing thing about, you know, and you revisit, you know, what, as we come to terms with our parents, for instance, and we start to see them as humans and less as gods. And you see with compassion where my parent might have been suffering. And then the whole aspect of my view of my childhood makes a subtle shift, right? I'm now remembering the same events, but they are different events now. They feel different. I see them differently.
Right. That's reality is context dependent. That's quantum thinking right there.
Right.
Because when you create a different context, you're creating a new relationship. So it's not, we don't have circumstances. May not be able to control all the circumstances. However, we have 100% command and sovereignty, jurisdiction over how we relate to the circumstances. That's where our power lies. So that's observer created reality. Right. I love that you brought up about, I knew we were connected because I have an older sister and brother. And I've watched how, what you said about the relationship with children and parents. And for whatever I was blessed, I would say, to see my parents as people when I was a teenager. So let's say at an early age.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, not as gods, not like, well, how could she be that way? How could he be that way? Or, you know, he left us when we were, or whatever. And that comes back to that bringing light to other people's least action pathways or their own wretched self syndrome that they didn't choose. Mm-hmm. How do we know they didn't choose it? Because no one would choose that if you were at conscious choice, right? So you didn't choose it. But when you see your parents in this way, two human beings who are just trying to do the best they can in life, like every human being, mm-hmm. that completely shifts, as you said, it shifts everything that ever happened to you in your life. And that I've worked with clients on that because, you know, as you know, probably people have had some really bad stuff mm-hmm. go down in their childhood. And, you know, 20, 30, 40 years later, that's still influencing their state, their ability to experience joy and happiness. And when you can clear that just by being able to understand and use these faculties of mind that enable us to create that new relationship. So it becomes a way of life. And that's why my husband, when I got into it, and then he goes, what are you stuck in that reality? I go, yeah, hello. You're right.
Let's shift that one because we are multidimensional. So that reality can be shifted in a moment.
Yes.
Or at least our experience of that reality.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Dianne and Bryn, this has been a wonderful conversation, and we are closing in at the 2-hour mark here. And we haven't given you a chance yet, Dianne, to talk about how people can get a hold of you, find your blog, find your book. And so why don't you take a minute to share that information, how people can get in contact with you.
The best way is on my website, DianneCollins.com. Very important that there are 2 N's in Dianne, so it's DianneCollins. And you will have, you will see my blog. Actually, you could connect to my Huffington Post blog from there. You can sign up for my newsletter. I hardly ever send them out, so you won't be barraged with information. But you will receive access to an article that everyone loves that shows you how very specific, old worldview, new worldview, how to apply this particularly to your business, called You Can't Get There From Here, Why Change Doesn't Work. And what else is on there? A lot of audio, a lot of video, I mean, a little bit of video, a lot of audio that you'll enjoy, and access to all the social media. And of course, information about my book, which is available wherever books are sold, in hardcover and in all ebook editions. Let me hold
Yay! Yes.
Yay!
I keep it sitting right next to me.
You can open it anywhere and get a message. Guess what I opened to for us in the show with? Intent opens the way.
Nice. Yeah, that's very great. And is it appropriate to talk about your LinkedIn group that you've started?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about it.
It's new. It's new.
It is new. It's only a month old. We meeting my husband, Alan Collins, who's my partner in marriage for 25 years in business, and our friend and colleague, Jacob Barokas, and we started a Quantum Thinkers group, Quantum Thinkers, coaches and leaders learning to quantum think. And basically that's what we're doing, is I'm putting out one discussion every week that's kind of a nuanced short form that has to do with quantum thinking, and then people go out and tune into that and then come back and comment on it. So that's really been great fun so far.
And that's on LinkedIn.
Everybody, that's on LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah. And it's called Quantum Thinkers Group?
Quantum Thinkers, yeah.
Quantum Thinkers. And it's not by invitation necessarily. Anybody can join?
Anybody can join.
Nice.
Anyone can join. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Everybody.
So do you have any final words that you want to share with us today before we sign off? Wild words of wisdom.
Final words are that once you enter, the beauty of a system, and I keep pointing to you both in the work that you're involved in, because those are systems too, and Quantum Think is a system. And the system is like a vortex. And because I feel that these metaphysical systems that you work within, Bryn and Janet, are very, very important information. And that, of course, quantum thinking assists everyone in making this leap. It's a literal leap in consciousness. And that the beauty of this system, it's like a vortex. When you enter the road system, it takes you with it. You have free will of how to get from one place to another. But the system is set up to make it easy, so you're not just meandering in the wild. When you go into a grocery store with your shopping list, you don't have to look at every single one of the items to find it, because there's a system. So Quantum Think is a system. And once you enter the system by reading Do You Quantum Think, you can listen to, the audios or however you get to it. All of a sudden, it clicks in. And it just becomes a natural way of you connecting to your own awareness. That's what really this is all about. Mm-hmm. And so when you go and you get a human design, I am kind of pitching you both here, but if you get an astrology reading, or if you get a human design reading, or whatever, Janet does a lot of things, that it's another way of connecting to that which is unique about you, to connecting to your own awareness, that when you're able to distinguish these nuances of who you are in the world, that makes everything more joyful. It gives you, when you distinguish who you are, you're able to express it in a much more powerful way in the world. And it just really accelerates what you're here to do and your joy in doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dianne, for joining us today. Dianne Collins, the book is Do You Quantum Think? Available at all booksellers. And join the LinkedIn group, find her on Facebook, go to her website, but just do it so that you too can be in the Quantum Think. I want to thank Bryn for joining me today as my co-host. Thank you so much. It's great to see you.
This is so much fun. Thank you, Janet.
You're very welcome. And everybody, take care, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.